Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S. Dear students, congratulations to all who have cleared the prelims 2020. Now, without any delay, you should start focusing on upcoming mains examination. We all know that right now the focus areas should be revision and answer writing practice in all the important themes of GS mains, with of course special emphasis on essay paper as well as GS4 ethics and integrity. Then the focus should be on attempting GS mains full length tests and revision and answer writing practice in optional subject. For the first two action points, RAU'S is inviting all its current as well as ex-students as well as our DNS followers who have cleared prelims 2020 to start with General Studies main test series and Quality Improvement Program for Mains 2020. Now the GS MTS and QIP 2020 as it's known, this program will help you first revise all important themes for upcoming Mains 2020. For this, there shall be Mains Compass, which will be subject-wise compilations, as well as Quality Improvement Program classes, which shall cover all the important topics of static as well as current affairs from the last 1 year. This program will do extensive answer writing practice in all important themes of GS paper 1, 2, 3, 4 as well as essay paper in QIP classes. Then this program will fine-tune your answer writing approach through rigorous testing, sample answers, evaluation and personal mentorship from the teachers. And so, the features of the QIP MTS program 2020 shall be answer writing and test discussion via live online classes of around 100 hours, thematic tests around 10, 12 full-length tests and 2 essay tests, sample answers within word limit shall be provided, evaluation shall be given within time limits, and personal mentorship shall also be provided for the mains tests. Now the fees for our MTS and QIP 2020 course is 30,000 rupees. But this course is complimentary for all the current students of our RAU'S, and the course is available at only 5,500 rupees for those who have cleared prelims 2020. Now this 5,500 fee is applicable to RAU'S ex-students as well as DNS followers who have cleared the prelims examination. Let us work to give mains 2020 your best shot. RAU'S Study Circle is with you as always. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. An answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we are going to discuss Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 1st of November 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion with a quiz. Before we go into the discussion, let's have a look at few of the statements which you have to yourself find out whether they are true or false. The term star campaigner has been defined in Representation of the People's Act 1951. The Election Commission imposes limits on campaign expenditure incurred by a candidate and not political parties. The Industrial Security Annex, that is ISA, to the India-US General Security of Military Information Agreement will provide a framework for exchange and protection of classified military information between United States and Indian government. India inducted C-130J Super Hercules and C-17 Globemaster 3 aircraft from US to acquire strategic airlift capabilities, mainly to transport combat-ready troops and weapons to the border with China in times of conflict. Galaxies are made up of mostly gases and stars, with gases being converted into stars during the life of galaxy. Spiral galaxies are named by their spiral structures that extend from the center into galactic disk. Galaxies formed stars at a lower rate when the universe was young than they do today. This first news which we have taken today appears on page number 1. Nath moves Supreme Court over Election Commission curbs on Congress campaigners list. So former Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister and Congress leader Kamal Nath moved Supreme Court against the decision of Election Commission to remove his name from list of star campaigners for his party. An allegation was made by BJP in the election commission that Mr. Kamal Nath referred to BJP's female candidate as item, and that is why he is not fit to be a star campaigner. Now in this regard, what a star campaigner is and why this mechanism of star campaigners or the campaigners for the political process has been created. That is what we are going to understand in this particular discussion. Now before we go on, if you are reading the newspaper and watching the television news channels, you must have seen a lot of prominent people from all the parties campaigning in state elections or national elections, even though they are not candidates. People like party presidents, CMs, prime ministers, and other prominent leaders do a lot of rallies when there is an election season throughout the region where the elections are going on in multiple constituencies. So of course, a lot of expenditure is also incurred. For example, their travel through helicopters and chartered jets, the expenditure on tents and rallies, the expenditure incurred on large and huge mega shows, as well as on multiple cars, their fuels in their cavalcades. At the same time, you also know that there is a limit up to which a particular candidate can spend in a particular election. And that limit of expenditure, of course, varies depending upon whether that election is for Legislative Assembly or for Lok Sabha. So that we all know. Now you should think that when there is a limit of 30 lakhs, 50 lakhs, or maybe 60 lakhs on the amount of expenses a particular candidate can make, how is it possible for these prominent people to do so many rallies? And that is where the concept of star campaigner comes into play. It was understood that it is very, very important for top leadership of any political party to visit various constituencies. And of course, there is bound to be a lot of expenditure on that. And if that expenditure is included in the individual candidate's expenditure, it is not fair. Because when the top leadership comes, expenditure is bound to happen. And if we include those expenses into a single candidate's expenditure, then a single rally will lead to breach of that limit. And then that candidate might not be able to legally spend more money. And so that is why this particular mechanism has been created. So star campaigner, in legal terms, just a campaigner for a political party, are the people nominated by parties to campaign, propagate their political ideologies, and to convince the voters to vote for that particular political party. And they can be celebrities, prominent leaders, national leaders, and even prime ministers and chief ministers. Recognized political parties can allocate up to 40 campaigners, and similarly unrecognized political parties can have up to 20 campaigners for them. And this list has to be communicated to Election Commission. And once the list has been communicated by a political party to the Election Commission, then the expenses on their rallies, their travels is not recorded on a personal expense of a candidate where the rally is being held. You should know that there is a legal backing for this particular provision, and that is Section 77 of Representation of the People's Act 1951 and not 1950, of course. And so the Section 77, Section 1A says that the expenditure incurred by leaders of a political party on account of travel by air or by any other means of transport for propagating program of political party shall not be deemed to be expenditure in connection with the election incurred or authorized by a candidate of that political party or his election agent for the purposes of this subsection. But there are certain conditions as well, that if star campaigner is propagating the ideology, that is fine, that is not eligible to be counted as a personal expenditure. But if a star campaigner visits a constituency, that person is not going to share the stage with the candidate. She is not going to personally endorse the candidate, and any advertisement or any particular pamphlet or any propaganda material should not have a common face of star campaigner as well as the local candidate. And if any of these conditions are violated, then the expenditure incurred on star campaigner can be counted as a personal expenditure of the local candidate. So now this is a very small news, but it needs to be understood that for the purpose of propagating the political ideology, leaders need to travel, they need to connect to the people, and for that it might not be necessary that they endorse the local candidate, and in that case the expenses are incurred by the political parties themselves. And Of course, you know that there is no cap on how much a political party can spend in a particular election. And so all such expenses are charged on political parties' accounts or any other personal accounts, but the candidates. And that is how they are saved from breaching the caps put on them. Let us now move on to the next news. This next article, high-tech transfers, appear as an FAQ on page number 13 in today's newspaper. So we all know that India and US signed the Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement during the third 2+2 dialogue of defense and foreign ministers of the two countries. And you should also know that this is the fourth and the last of the foundational agreements that both countries have concluded, starting with GSOMIA and ending at BECA. So these set of 4 agreements which United States signs with its defense partners are known as foundational agreements. So in this particular discussion, we will understand that what is the significance of signing of these 4 set of foundational agreements between India and United States, how it is reflective of increasing trust between the two countries, and what are the challenges which these two nations still need to resolve in order to make full use of these foundational agreements. In the course of discussion, we will also understand what these agreements denote and what are the practical utilities of each one of them. Let us start by first understanding that as soon as the two nations come closer as far as the defense ties are concerned and their national interests converge or they align together, how is it reflected in their defense ties? So of course, if a country A is technologically very advanced as compared to the country B, and if they are coming together, A is bound to sell a lot of defense equipments to country B, and if A does not trust B, then they would not sell, and for that they need to sign certain agreements. For example, some agreements which would make it impossible for the country B to give access to country C to the defense equipments which have been sold by country A. Of course, because country A doesn't want these technologies to be transferred to country C, that is a kind of first level of development or the building up of trust between these two nations. Once that is done, of course, the next stage would be to design a common communication platforms or the systems which will enable seamless transaction of information to and fro from A and B. Of course, that should be encrypted, which should not be accessible to any adversary of either A or either B. And so that has to be chalked out in a form of an agreement. Let's say that is also done. Then the third stage of building trust as far as defense ties are concerned is use of common facilities. And that is very tricky, because if B is going to use, let's say, a defense airport or a naval port of a country A, of course, they will get to know and to learn a lot of things which A might consider as secret. For example, if an Indian Air Force pilot visits an aircraft carrier of United States, they are going to look into the functioning of aircraft, what technologies do they have, and everything. And so there needs to be a level of trust so that the information learned by B are not transferred to any other adversary. And finally, the epitome of trust comes, or the final destination of defense ties is the sharing of real-time intelligence. That could be geospatial intelligence, that could be ground level intelligence, any kind of intelligence if it is shared between two countries on a real time basis. For example, if CIA comes to know about some terrorist movement in other country, if they think it is relevant to India, they are sharing it, and there is a trust, and vice versa from India. If that happens, these two countries would be an ideal defense partners. That does not happen, but the signing of these 4 agreements definitely shows an increasing level of trust between India and United States. So let us now go over quickly through these agreements and what they mean in practical reality. So starting with GSOMIA, or General Security of Military Information Agreement, which was signed between India and United States in 2002. So that was the first agreement or first foundational agreement as far as defense ties are concerned. And what it did was that enabled the exchange as well as protection of classified military secret among these two countries, which is India and United States. Now in 2019, Another agreement similar to this was signed, which was Industrial Security Annex. So these two are similar. The difference is that the agreement signed in 2002 enabled the transfer and the sale of military secret from government to government. So if government of United States authorizes a military secret to be transferred to the military or the government of India, that was allowed. But the sale from private to private was not allowed, which was done in 2019. So this was the first set of agreement. Now what it will do in reality, or how it will change the scenario? So it will enable greater industry to industry collaboration for co-production and co-development in defense sector. And so a company of India can come up with joint collaboration with a company of United States, and they can co-produce a fighter jet, which was not possible earlier. So that is one, and we discussed that of course is the basic level of understanding between the two nations. And so the next set of cooperation would involve operational cooperation, which means that collaboration and cooperation as far as missions are concerned. It may deal with servicing, it may deal with refueling or any other service, and that is operationalized through the next agreement, which is called LEMOA, or Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. So that is logistical exchange is enabled through this particular agreement, which allows militaries of US and India to replenish, access supplies, as well as to access servicing in land facilities, at air bases, and as well as using their ports. So for instance, US Navy's P-8 aircraft landed in Port Blair just last month for refueling, and that was because the countries had signed LEMOA. Of course, in the absence of such an agreement, this was possible, but that was troublesome and it required very high level of clearances. But now this process of utilizing each other common bases has been automated. Now LEMOA was signed in 2016, and you can understand that signing of LEMOA means that the partner trusts the other enough to expose its own valuable assets to the other party. Because when you are going into air bases and ports, you're of course exposing your secret technology and exposing your methods of operations to the other side as well. And so it requires a level of trust. So after the utilization of each other's facilities, the next level of trust comes from the development of secure communication, and to be able to use that communication to convey the information, which was operationalized through COMCASA, which was signed and operationalized in 2018. Now this particular agreement has allowed Indian forces to procure advanced secure communication equipments from US. And you should know that such equipment were earlier denied to be used by India, even for the defense equipments being manufactured in United States. So we know that India has purchased C-17s, C-130s, all these are American made, and they also have communication network. But when India purchased them, the communication systems from them were removed, and India had to go to the open market to deploy a similar communication system. But now since India has signed this agreement, India will be able to procure encrypted communication system which US itself uses. And so now a communication through secure network which is encrypted will be enabled. This means that America is confident that it can rely on encrypted systems to connect the two militaries, air force as well as navies. This will also provide seamless connectivity between militaries of America as well as India if or ever they have to conduct a joint operation. And then of course the final and the pinnacle of defense cooperation is BECA, which enables exchange of geospatial information. So there are satellites deployed by America as well as India, which provide information which is not only used for navigation but also for targeting, for intelligence. But so far we don't have access to American geospatial intelligence. But with BECA, we have access to highly classified information, and that too in real time. So for example, if there is an American drone moving over Iraq, and if we want access after the signing of BECA, we can have access to those images. And what obviously that means is that the precision of our targeting systems, for example the missiles, the drones, will be very effective and their efficacy will improve because of high resolution images, the coordinates and the locations of the targets enhanced and their reliability has increased due to added input from American systems. Obviously, we know that this was signed just last week in 2020. So you can see that over a passage of 2 decades, how close India and America have grown as far as defense ties are concerned, and that is reflective of the increasing trust among these two nations. So now we understand that what these agreements mean, and we know that currently United States is the most powerful and technologically advanced military nation. And these agreements govern the nature and the scope of American defense partnerships. Through these agreements, partners get access to the most advanced weapons, and at the same time, America gets access to the remote places. So for example, through these agreements, the capability of United States to patrol Indian Ocean and South China Sea has drastically increased. Of course, it is beneficial for India as well. And so, these agreements are clearly reflective of increasing India-US defense cooperation. It started with GSOMIA, then came Civil Nuclear Agreement of 2005, and then finally BECA of 2020. And so, the defense cooperation has been advancing at a rapid pace. We also know that US has relaxed restrictions on technology trade in India's favor considerably, and it designated India as a major defense partner. And somewhere it is also indicative of convergence of common vision between India and America as far as Indo-Pacific region is concerned, where both countries along with Japan and Australia are increasing their military cooperation. Most of these countries ultimately use defense weapons manufactured by America, be it Japan or Australia. And so US built platforms used by partner countries which can talk to each other, which can operate each other facilities and share the common operational information will go a long way in countering the increasing influence of China in Indo-Pacific region. But this is easier said than done. There are challenges which have the potential to destroy the level of trust which have been built up between US and India. And let us discuss those challenges. So the first challenge comes from India's huge, big, massive dependence on Russia. Most of our defense equipments even now are sourced from Russia. They use Russian communication systems, they use Russian technology. And so a lot of commentators believe that increasingly close ties with America may limit India's choices. Because the closer we get to United States, more and more equipments will be sourced from United States, and the conditions put by US may further make it very difficult for India to source its equipments from Russia, because after all, US is very particular about the integrity and safety of its networks. And if India continues to persist with the closer defense ties with Russia, it may not go down well with United States. And so these agreements might not be as fruitful as it is being projected right now. And the second challenge comes from the inhibitions which India has due to American dependence and its high level of collaboration with Pakistan, especially in matter of Afghanistan. We know that geostrategically the position of Pakistan is such that it can always leverage it to get a better deal from United States. We know that America wants to get out of Afghanistan, and that urgency of America is being fully exploited by Pakistan. And so India is extremely wary of Pakistan's deep-rooted ties with Pentagon, and India knows the kind of dependence which Washington has on Pakistan to access Afghanistan, and Pakistan at any point of time can leverage this locational superiority to become a big roadblock. But the only common factor which people believe will keep the India-US collaboration going in a positive direction is the emerging Chinese threat, especially in Indo-Pacific region, which they believe will supersede both of these suspicions. And that is what the topic of the next discussion is as well, which is on militarization of Quad and inclusion of Australia into Malabar exercises. So as far as foundational agreements are concerned, you should be clear in your mind as to what these mean. What are the full forms and the practical applications of these different agreements? And what are the challenges which might come in the way of full implementation of these? This next article appears on page number 14. The coming together of Quad in the seas. So with the announcement on October 19 that India would invite Australia to participate in the three-nation India-Japan-US Malabar exercise, which is a naval exercise, after a period of 13 years, this thought that somewhat Malabar is a step towards militarization of Quad. Now, this particular article does not exactly talks about this. But what it talks about is not very relevant from the perspective of UPSC examination. Since the skirmishes along the line of actual control in this particular year have significantly increased, and so is the tension between India and China. And so it is important for us to understand that whether the inclusion of Australia into this Malabar naval exercise is militarization of Quad or not, and if it is a militarization of Quad, then will it work to prevent a war between India and China, and is this one of the probable strategies which India can resort in order to counter China? This has become a very, very important topic from the perspective of international relations in 2020 mains. So starting with Quad, we have discussed this issue many times in our DNS. It basically is a quadrilateral security dialogue, which is so far an informal strategic forum between US, Japan, Australia and India, which is so far limited to not so regular summits, information exchanges and military drills among the member countries. And the inclusion of Australia into Malabar naval exercise, which is different from Quad, but although the common participation from the four nations, is a significant step as far as this grouping is concerned. Even though it is not so far clear whether Australia's participation this year will be one-off event or will be a permanent addition like Japan was added in 2015, and since then it has continued to participate. The four nations have significantly expanded their defense ties bilaterally, and they are also in last 2 to 3 years coordinating their positions on regional issues, especially with respect to South China Sea and Indo-Pacific region. And India already has military logistics agreement with all 3 of the Quad members or the other Quad members. But still, India-Australia relationship as far as military is concerned so far is the weakest if you compare that with India-Japan and India-US relationship. And the inclusion of Australia into Malabar has actually consolidated the Quad into some kind of a military grouping, but it is so far nowhere officially mentioned. But there are indications of that. And let's see what are those indications. And that is the strategic signaling through these military exercises. Now it is true that these 3 nations are not the only nations with which India conducts regular military exercises. India does so with many other nations. But the focus of Malabar exercise is on anti-submarine warfare. And that is a clear signal towards China, because China is trying to increase its influence in South China Sea and in greater Indo-Pacific region through use of submarines. And by showing that the focus of Malabar exercise is on anti-submarine warfare, these 4 nations together are actually kind of preparing to counter China. Then another point which should be noted is that all 4 countries operate the same or quite similar or comparable anti-submarine warfare reconnaissance platforms, and so they are quite compatible and ready to operate together. You should also not discount the fact that India has recently finalized all the 4 foundational agreements just recently, which was the topic of discussion of the last article. Many commentators see the Malabar exercise as a strong step towards militarization of Quad. So does that mean Quad can or must have a joint combat role in case of deterrence as far as China is concerned? Can India utilize the Quad or the militarization of the Quad to deter China from an attack across LAC? An answer for that is no. It will not work to prevent war between India and China. And there are 3 very solid reasons for that. And let us understand those reasons. And the first reason is that in a scenario of a combat, the combat will be continental in nature, especially along LAC, and that is far away from the oceans or the seas. And so we can say that India's trouble with China are purely continental in nature, or it is a continental problem. And a maritime group, possibly involving coalitions like Quad, is unlikely to be useful. And so there cannot be a maritime solution to a continental problem. What at max a militarized Quad can do is that it can ensure that China will be discouraged from expanding a limited continental war into oceans. There will be, of course, a deterrence if there is a militarized Quad, And so the chances are that war will be highly localized and China would not threaten the maritime trade or the ports or sea line of communications of India. But the fact that if we still have militarized squad, it cannot prevent a continental problem. It can at max prevent the continental problem from becoming a maritime problem. So for that, India needs to find a continental solution. For that, India needs resources. But India's resources are quite limited if we compare them to that of China. India faces a lot of problems when it comes to military. So if you see India's military budget over the past 2 decades, the allocation towards Navy in general and towards naval modernization in particular is very low or dismal. So if India is not able to counter China as far as LAC is concerned, some people suggest that militarization of Quad would make it difficult for China as far as oceans are concerned. So it is like saying, if you're making it difficult for me on the land, I'm going to make it difficult for you on the oceans in form of groupings. But as a partner of a grouping which is a maritime group, you need to have a strong navy, but we don't have enough resources for naval modernization. And then inter-services rivalry, which is basically a rivalry among or between Army, Air Force and Navy, ensures that the highest priority is given to Army, followed by Air Force, and then in the last comes Navy. And so this again reinforces the claim that militarization of Quad will not be a solution simply because India does not have matching level of capabilities when it comes to Indian Navy. But even if we discount the budgetary limitations, then we have a problem of operational concepts or doctrines. There is a very little information in the open domain that suggests India has developed operational concepts or doctrines that allow its navy to be deployed in combat zones or in conflict areas. So for example, as far as usage of nuclear weapon is concerned, we have no first use policy. But there is no policy when it comes to deployment of Indian Navy in conflict zones such as South China Sea. And without such doctrine, how would we operate even as a part of militarized Quad? And that is why it needs to be understood that Quad is a grouping and not an alliance like NATO. And the end purpose of Quad so far should be to create enough uncertainty in the mind of China, which creates a big deterrence for it to attack India. So you can say that the purpose of militarized Quad would be to prevent a war, but it would not be to help India if that war breaks out. Of course, one of the big reasons for which a militarized Quad cannot be trusted upon is the increasing inward-looking tendency of USA and its decreasing commitment towards partner countries far away from United States. So these are the reasons because of which it is premature to believe that militarization of Quad will occur, and if it does occur, it is going to help India. Let's now move on to the next news. The next article, what is the D614G mutation in coronavirus, appears on page number 12, which is the science and technology page. It talks about a particular kind of mutation happening inside coronavirus, which according to a lot of studies has become the dominant variant in global COVID-19 pandemic. So we know that viruses go through mutations all the time. But this particular mutation is particularly dominant when the scientists, researchers are sampling coronavirus taken from across the world. And so it becomes important for us to understand the significance of this particular mutation. So mutation basically means error in copying of genetic material. We know that new coronavirus is an RNA virus. It's not a DNA virus, which is a collection of genetic material, and it is packed inside a protein shell, as you can see in the animation. And viruses cannot multiply without using a cell's protein making machinery. So they first need to gain entry into healthy cell. Coronaviruses have a shell of spiky protein that allow them to bind to the cell and a specific receptor in the cell. The viruses then fuse with the cell, and once inside, release a strand of RNA, as you can see. Like a blueprint, RNA is a string of genetic code that has instructions to make exact copies of the virus. But that does not always happen. Tiny particles in the host cell called ribosomes are equipped to read genetic material. And in this process, when the virus's RNA passes through ribosomes, the ribosome produces viral proteins, and there the error happens which causes the mutation, because these viral proteins will be utilized to make copies of viral RNA. As more proteins and RNA strands are made, they multiply, making exponentially more copies that fill up the cell. Then there are other mechanisms which are beyond the scope of this discussion, which are utilized in the host cell to come together, forming a complete virus, and when fully assembled, the virus can exit the cell to seek other healthy cells and start the process again, and it is repeated again and again. Now what this particular article talks about is the mutation D614G. This particular mutation, so far through our discussions in our earlier DNS episodes, we know that spike protein attaches itself to human ACE2 receptor. And what this mutation D614G has done is that it has increased the efficiency of this particular binding between the spiky protein and ACE2 receptor. Because of this increased binding efficiency of the mutated coronavirus, higher viral load is being observed in the cases which are infected with this mutated virus. Although so far there is no data to suggest that whether the mortality has increased or decreased or remained the same due to this particular mutation, but people infected with mutated coronavirus with the D614G mutation are being observed with higher viral load, because what this mutation does is that it enables the virus to bind more strongly with the human ACE2 receptor and consequent entry into human cell. Now the reports have come which suggest that it is quite prevalent in India, and so researchers have started to think about the effectivity of the vaccine which are under trial or in various stages of production. We still don't know whether the effectivity of the vaccines will vary because of this particular mutation, but a recent publication in the Nature journal, which is the top publication in the science field, has said that when they conducted experiments on hamsters with this particular mutated coronavirus, the effectivity of the vaccines were not very different. And so they concluded that the particular mutation may not reduce the ability of the vaccines in clinical trials. But since mutations are an ongoing and a continuous process, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of vaccines become ineffective when they become ready for commercial use, because by that time virus may have been totally mutated, and so the ability of the vaccine to elicit the kind of antibody response is also compromised. So from this particular discussion, keep in mind how a virus or a RNA virus like coronavirus enters into body, utilizes the mechanisms of the host cell to replicate, and in this process gets mutated, and what this mutation does as far as the effectivity of vaccines are concerned. This article, Spiral Galaxy Bars May Prevent New Stars, appears on page number 12, which is Science and Technology page. This article talks about a hypothesis regarding certain type of structures found in galaxies which have their role to play in new star formation and decline of a galaxy. So let us discuss some basics. We all know that galaxies are made up mostly of gases and stars, with gas being converted into stars during the life of a galaxy. So this process continues. So if we want to understand galaxies, we first need to understand and estimate how the amounts of both gases and stars change with time. If we understand this relationship, we understand the formation and the decline of the galaxies. And astronomers have long known that galaxies formed stars at a much higher rate when the universe was young. That is, around 8 to 10 billion years ago, the star formation activity in galaxies peaked. But since then, the rate at which stars are forming has declined. But the cause of this decline in the rate at which stars form or gases convert themselves into stars is unknown, because there is no information regarding the amount of atomic hydrogen gas when the universe first began. So when we don't have an estimate or a clear idea as to how much hydrogen did we start with, which was the primary fuel for the star formation, we cannot estimate the cause of decline. And hence the central question to be understood is why some galaxies are forming more stars at the center while others don't. Since this article mentions barred galaxies and spiral galaxies, let us first understand what spiral galaxies are, as you can see in the image. Spiral galaxies are named by their spiral structures that extend from the center into galactic disk. This structure is mainly flat, rotating disk containing stars, gas along with dust, and a central concentration of stars known as bulge. This bulge is surrounded by much fainter halo stars, and that is why the intensity declines once you reach the periphery. The spiral arms are sites of ongoing star formation and are brighter than the surrounding disk because it houses young hot stars that inhabit them. So what are barred spiral galaxies? So the barred galaxies are also spiral galaxies, but at the center, instead of a clear-cut spiral, you have something like a bar. Of course, it cannot be an ideal cuboid, but it is shaped like a bar. And some barred galaxies have shown a higher concentration of newly formed stars, suggesting that there is some kind of a relationship between bar and star formation. So nearly 2/3 of the disk galaxies in the local universe, the universe which we can observe, are found to have this barred structure. For example, the Milky Way galaxy, where our solar system is located, is classified as barred spiral galaxy. Article which appears in the newspaper today is about a paper and a hypothesis that the bar structure acts as a type of stellar or star nursery, which fuels the star birth at its center. The bar is thought to act as a mechanism that channels gas inwards from the spiral arms and in effect funneling the flow to create new stars. This process is also thought to explain why many barred spiral galaxies have active galactic nuclei. So this is just an observation. There is no explanation behind it, and researchers are working to find a reason. So since many spiral galaxies have bar structures, it is likely that they are recurring phenomena in spiral galaxy development. And so, what decides a new star formation, or what decides the high rate of new star formation, is the oscillation between a spiral galaxy and a barred spiral galaxy. When it is in a barred phase, obviously it will lead to high synthesis of stars, and when it converts itself into a spiral galaxy, the rate of formation of new stars declines. And recent studies have confirmed the idea that bars are a sign of galaxy reaching full maturity as the formative years end. But the problem is that not all spiral galaxies have bars. And so the role of bars, why they exist, what triggers their formation, and whether they foster star formation are interesting questions, and they are still unanswered. The research work on which this particular article is based studied 4 barred galaxies, out of which 3 appear to prevent stars from forming at their central region covered by the length of the bar. So what is the role actually played by spirals according to the researchers? So in 3 of the 4 galaxies, they find that the region covered by the length of the bar does not have enough gas. So it is depleted in hydrogen, which is believed to condense to actually form the stars. So this can be taken as an evidence for the bar redistributing the gas in the central region of these spiral galaxies. So you can understand this like a whirlpool we see in rivers. There is a cavity formed at the central region with no gas and stars. But at the same time, researchers do not see the same depletion of gas and stars in the 4th galaxy. And the reason they believe is that this galaxy does not have an old enough bar. They believe it will take a few million years for the bar to evacuate the gas that forms the stars. The bar is complex and dynamic structure, and the paper adds an interesting angle by suggesting this method in which it prevents star formation. But this seems to be a tip of iceberg. More statistical samples are needed with new observations from radio to ultraviolet wavelengths for more galaxies. So far this is just a hypothesis, a speculation, but what you can keep in mind is spiral galaxies, Milky Way is a spiral galaxy, and what are bars.